The Valorian Dominion had ruled the Milky Way galaxy for 12,000 years. It was an empire so vast that light itself would take generations to cross its borders. 400,000 star systems bent to its will. 23 species served under its command, and at the top sat the Archons, ancient beings of terrifying power who could crush minds with a thought and see futures before they happened. They had conquered every worthy species they had ever found. They had destroyed those who resisted, and they had enslaved those too weak to fight. This was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak served. It had always been this way. It would always be this way, or so they believed. In the year 2301 by Earth's calendar, a Dominion scout ship entered an unremarkable solar system at the edge of the galaxy's spiral arm. The ship's captain, a Valorian named Kethris, had explored 1,000 such systems in his career. Most were empty. Some held primitive life. Very few held anything of interest. But this system was different. The third planet from the yellow sun was covered in water and green land. Cities dotted its surface. Satellites orbited above it. Radio signals poured into space, carrying voices and music and the chaos of 1 billion conversations. Kethris watched the data scroll across his screen. His second officer stood beside him, her face twisted in disgust. "Primitives," she said. "They haven't even developed faster than light travel. They're still burning fossil fuels, fighting wars over lines drawn on maps. They're barely above animals." Kethris nodded slowly. The species on this world called themselves humans. They were short-lived creatures, rarely surviving more than 100 years. They were divided into hundreds of nations that constantly fought each other. They killed their own kind over differences in skin color, beliefs, and imaginary borders. "What should we do with them?" his second officer asked. Kethris thought for a moment. The Dominion had protocols for situations like this. Species that showed promise could be recruited. Species that posed a threat could be destroyed. Species that were neither were simply catalogued and forgotten, but humans were interesting. They were violent and chaotic, yes, but they were also creative. Their technology was advancing rapidly, and most importantly, they bred quickly and worked hard. "Category 7 primitive," Kethris announced. "Suitable for labor integration." He sent his report to the Archon Council. 6 months later, the Dominion fleet arrived at Earth. The humans had no chance. Their nuclear weapons were useless against Dominion shields. Their armies were swept aside like leaves in a storm. Their governments surrendered within a week. Those that didn't were burned from orbit. The Archons looked upon humanity and saw only tools, workers, soldiers, entertainment for their gladiatorial pits. Nothing more. They would come to regret this. The neural compliance system was the Dominion's greatest tool of control. It was a small implant placed at the base of the skull. It connected to the brain and suppressed aggressive thoughts toward Dominion masters. It made slaves obedient. It made resistance impossible. It had been used on dozens of species over thousands of years. Every human received an implant. Children were implanted at birth. Those who tried to remove their implants died screaming as the device triggered a fatal neural cascade. Within a generation, free humans no longer existed. Earth became a breeding world. Humans were raised like livestock, sorted by health and intelligence, and shipped across the galaxy to wherever they were needed. Strong humans worked in mines on asteroid colonies. Smart humans served as technicians and engineers. Beautiful humans entertained Dominion nobles. The violent ones fought and died in gladiatorial arenas for alien amusement. Families were torn apart. Culture was erased. Languages were forbidden. Humans were given new names, Dominion names, and taught to forget where they came from. The years passed. Then the decades. Then the centuries. By the year 2847, humanity had been enslaved for 546 years. Over 11 billion humans were scattered across the Dominion, serving in every corner of the empire. They were so common that most species barely noticed them. They were like furniture, useful, invisible, and easily replaced. But the Archons had made a terrible mistake. They had spread humans everywhere. Humans served on warships. Humans maintained power grids. Humans worked in weapons factories. Humans cleaned the halls of Archon palaces. Humans knew every secret, every weakness, every vulnerability of the empire that had enslaved them. And deep within their implant-controlled minds, some of them remembered. The resistance called itself the Unbroken. It began as whispers between slaves who somehow retained fragments of their identity. A look exchanged in a corridor, a symbol scratched into a wall, a name passed from parent to child. Earth. The Unbroken had no weapons. They had no ships. They had no army. What they had was time, patience, and a hatred that burned across generations. They began to plan. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was born on a Dominion breeding world in 2799. Her parents were both slaves, and she never knew their original family name. She was identified early as having exceptional intelligence and was selected for scientific training. By the age of 30, she worked in one of the Archon's most prestigious neural research laboratories. The neural compliance system was her specialty. She was supposed to improve it, to make it more effective, to ensure that no slave would ever have an independent thought again. Instead, she studied it for a different reason. Yuki had been contacted by the Unbroken when she was 22. A fellow human worker had approached her in a maintenance corridor and spoken words that made her blood freeze. "Do you remember the color of Earth's sky?" Yuki had never seen Earth. No living human had for centuries. But somehow, impossibly, she knew the answer. "Blue," she whispered. "It was blue." The other human smiled. "Then you're one of us." For 8 years, Yuki lived 2 lives. In one life, she was a loyal Dominion scientist, advancing her career and earning the trust of her Archon masters. In the other, she was a key member of the Unbroken, secretly working to crack the code of the neural compliance system. The implants communicated with each other through a quantum frequency network. If someone could broadcast the right counter-frequency on that network, they could disable every implant in the galaxy at once. The technical challenges were enormous. The risk of discovery was constant. Dozens of resistance members were caught and executed over the years, their minds ripped apart by Archon interrogators. But somehow, Yuki's work continued. On the night of June 15, 2847, she finally succeeded. Yuki sat alone in her laboratory, staring at a small device no larger than her fist. It had taken her 8 years to build. It contained technology that the Dominion had never imagined, innovations that should have been impossible for a slave to create. She called it the awakening signal. Her hands trembled as she held it. Once she activated this device, there was no going back. Either it would work, and 11 billion humans would suddenly be free, or it would fail, and she would die, along with everyone who had helped her. She thought of her parents, who had died in the mines without ever knowing freedom. She thought of the children she had seen sold at auction, their eyes dead and empty. She thought of the gladiators she had watched die for alien entertainment, their bodies discarded like garbage. She thought of Earth, a world she had never seen but had always loved. "For all of us," she whispered. She pressed the button. The signal propagated through the quantum network at speeds that made light look slow. It spread from system to system, planet to planet, ship to ship. Wherever a human being existed with a neural compliance implant, the signal found them, and it set them free. Marcus Stone was fighting in the gladiatorial pits of Kethris Forth when the awakening came. He was 34 years old and had spent the last 15 years as a fighter, killing other slaves for the entertainment of Dominion nobles. He had won 247 matches. He had killed 312 opponents. He had survived wounds that should have killed him a dozen times over. He remembered nothing of his life before the pits. The implant had taken his memories, his personality, everything that made him who he was. He was just stone, a killing machine, a tool, a thing. Then the signal hit. Marcus collapsed in the middle of the arena. His opponent, another human slave, collapsed beside him. The crowd of aliens laughed, thinking it was part of the show. But then Marcus opened his eyes, and everything was different. Memories flooded back. His mother's face, his father's voice, the smell of rain on earth soil, a smell he had experienced only once. In early childhood, before they took him away. He remembered being human. He remembered being free. He remembered being stolen. Marcus looked up at the Dominion nobles watching from their luxury boxes, their alien faces twisted in confusion and annoyance. He looked at the guards surrounding the arena, their weapons ready. He looked at the other human gladiators, all of them waking up just as he had, all of them remembering. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus Stone smiled. "Brothers," he said, his voice carrying across the arena. "Sisters, do you remember who we are?" "Yes," they answered. "Do you remember what they did to us?" "Yes." "Then let's show them what happens when you cage humanity." The gladiators turned on their captors. Within an hour, the arena was burning, the guards were dead, and the Dominion nobles were running for their lives. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On mining colonies, human workers seized control of equipment and turned it on their overseers. On warships, human crew members overwhelmed their alien officers and took the bridges. On manufacturing worlds, human technicians shut down production lines and began reprogramming combat drones. The Dominion had spent 5 centuries embedding humans into every critical system in their empire. They had never considered what would happen if those humans decided to stop being slaves. Now they found out. The first day of the rebellion was the bloodiest. Dominion security forces responded with overwhelming brutality, killing humans wherever they found them. On some worlds, orbital bombardments wiped out entire cities. On others, poison gas flooded human quarters. 4 billion humans died in the first week. 4 billion. The number was incomprehensible. Entire communities wiped from existence. Families that had endured centuries of slavery suddenly erased. Children who had barely tasted freedom cut down before they could understand what it meant. The Archons thought this would break humanity. They thought that enough death, enough horror, enough suffering would crush the rebellion before it could truly begin. They were wrong. The genocide did not break humanity, it transformed them. The survivors no longer fought for freedom. They fought for vengeance. They fought for the dead. They fought with a fury that transcended reason, that burned away fear, that made death irrelevant. Commander Marcus Stone stood on the burning ruins of the Kethris IV arena, surrounded by 200,000 human survivors. They had no fleet. They had few weapons. They were surrounded by 3 Dominion battle groups that had been sent to exterminate them. Marcus looked at his people. Some were gladiators like him. Some were workers, technicians, servants. Some were children, their eyes wide with terror and confusion. All of them were human. All of them were free. All of them were looking to him for guidance. He thought about what to say. He thought about speeches he had heard, words of inspiration and hope. But in the end, he kept it simple. "They wanted soldiers," he said. "Let's give them war." The Battle of Kethris IV should have been a massacre. The Dominion forces outnumbered the humans 100 to 1. They had orbital superiority, heavy weapons, and air support. But the humans had something the Dominion couldn't match. They had nothing left to lose. For 3 days, the humans fought. They used guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and suicide attacks. They turned the ruins of the arena into a death trap. They used captured weapons against their former masters. When they ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When they ran out of knives, they used their bare hands. On the third day, Dominion reinforcements arrived, but so did something else. A fleet of 37 human-captured warships emerged from faster-than-light travel above Kethris IV. They were crewed by former slaves who had learned to operate them by watching their masters. They were armed with weapons that had once been used to conquer humanity. Now those weapons turned on the conquerors. The Dominion battle groups were destroyed within hours. Kethris IV became the first liberated human world, but it would not be the last. Across the galaxy, Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched the reports coming in. Human uprisings on thousands of worlds. Dominion forces reeling from attacks they had never anticipated. Captured ships forming the nucleus of a human fleet. She stood in a hidden base on a forgotten moon, surrounded by other resistance leaders. They were scientists, engineers, soldiers, and survivors. The leaders of the Unbroken who had worked toward this moment for generations. "It's begun," she said. "There's no going back now. We're either going to win our freedom or die trying." An old man stepped forward. His name was Chen Wei, and he had been leading the Unbroken since before Yuki was born. His hands shook with age, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "For 500 years we waited," he said. "We planned. We suffered. We watched our people die in chains, and we never gave up hope." He looked at the star map, showing thousands of points of conflict across the galaxy. "Our ancestors are watching. Let's make them proud." Yuki nodded. She thought of Earth, that blue world she had never seen, and made a silent promise. "We're coming home." The Dominion had ruled for 12,000 years. They had never faced a real threat. They had never known true fear. But as reports of the human rebellion spread across their empire, the Archons began to understand something terrible. They had enslaved a species of survivors, a species of fighters, a species that would rather burn the galaxy to ash than live in chains. They had awakened something they could not control, and now nothing would ever be the same. The quantum signal that freed humanity traveled faster than light itself. It passed through Dominion firewalls like they were not there. It touched every human mind in the galaxy within 17 minutes. And when it was done, the universe had changed forever. Admiral Priya Sharma was standing on the bridge of the Dominion dreadnought Eternal Judgment when her implant went silent. She had served on this ship for 23 years, first as a junior navigator, then as a senior officer, and finally as the ship's primary navigation specialist. The Valorian captain trusted her completely. Why wouldn't he? She had never had an independent thought in her entire adult life. Then the signal came, and Priya remembered everything. She remembered her grandmother's stories about Earth. She remembered her mother being sold to a mining colony when Priya was 7 years old. She remembered her sister dying in a Dominion medical experiment. She remembered pretending to be happy while her soul screamed in silent agony. The captain was speaking, but Priya no longer heard him. She was looking around the bridge at the other humans. The weapons officer, the engineering liaison, the communications specialist. There were 11 humans on this bridge, all of them waking up at the same moment, all of them meeting each other's eyes. They didn't need to speak. They didn't need a plan. They knew what to do. The weapons officer drew his sidearm and shot the captain through the head. It took 4 minutes to secure the bridge. It took another 2 hours to secure the entire ship. 700 Valorian crew members died. 43 humans died with them. But when the fighting was over, the eternal judgment belonged to humanity. Priya sat in the captain's chair, a seat no human had ever occupied on a Dominion warship. She opened a communication channel to other ships in the fleet. 14 of them answered with human voices. 14 ships, crewed by newly awakened humans, ready to fight. "This is Priya Sharma," she said. "Today, we take back what they stole from us." Across the Dominion, similar scenes played out thousands of times. Some humans took ships, some took weapons factories, some took orbital defense platforms, some simply took revenge on the masters who had tormented them for so long. The first 6 hours of the rebellion were chaos. Human slaves rose up in the great halls of the Archon Palace on Valoria Prime. They were cut down by psionic blasts that boiled their brains inside their skulls. But more came, and more, and more. For every human that died, 10 more seemed to appear, armed with kitchen knives and broken furniture, fighting with a fury that terrified their would-be executioners. On the manufacturing world of Hestor 7th, humans seized control of the planet's main weapons factory. Within hours, they were producing small arms and ammunition for the rebellion. Within days, they were building combat drones programmed to recognize and kill Dominion soldiers. On the prison moon of Karak, human inmates overwhelmed their guards and freed 17,000 prisoners from 100 different species. Most of those species had been crushed under Dominion rule for millennia. They joined the human uprising without hesitation. By the end of the first day, humanity had seized control of 2,300 warships, 47 orbital defense networks, and dozens of critical infrastructure systems. It was the largest slave uprising in galactic history. The Archons responded with genocide. High Archon Valeth was the supreme ruler of the Dominion. He was 9,000 years old. He had watched species rise and fall like waves on a shore. He had crushed rebellions that made this one look like a child's tantrum. He was not concerned. "Eliminate them," he commanded. "Every last one." The order went out across the Empire. All humans were to be killed on sight. No exceptions, no mercy. The species was to be erased from existence. On breeding worlds, Dominion soldiers marched into human quarters and opened fire on families eating their evening meals. On transport ships, human cargo was ejected into space. On colony worlds, orbital bombardments turned human settlements into glass craters. The death toll climbed with horrifying speed. 1 billion dead in the first 3 days. 2 billion by the end of the week. 4 billion within a month. The Archons had killed species before. They had wiped civilizations from the stars without a second thought. They expected humans to break, to surrender, to beg for mercy as so many others had done. But humans were not like other species. Commander Marcus Stone received the reports on Kethris Fu. 4 billion dead. The number was beyond comprehension. It would have broken most beings. It would have crushed their will to fight. For Marcus, it did something else. He gathered his 200,000 survivors in the ruins of the arena where he had once fought for alien entertainment. They stood in silence as he told them the truth. Their families were dead. Their friends were dead. Everything they had known was gone. "They think this will stop us," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with a rage that seemed to heat the air around him. "They think if they kill enough of us, the rest will surrender. They think we're like the other species they've conquered, weak, cowardly, breakable." He paused, looking out at the faces of his people. Some were crying, some were screaming. Some stood in shocked silence. "They're wrong," he continued. "Every human they kill is another reason to fight. Every child they murder is another debt they owe. Every world they burn is another fire in our hearts." He raised his fist. "We are not going to surrender. We are not going to negotiate. We are going to make them pay for every single life they've taken. And when this is over, the galaxy will know, you do not mess with humanity." The survivors cheered. It was a sound of pain and grief and rage, but also of something else: hope, purpose, unity. The human guerrilla campaign began. Traditional warfare was impossible. The Dominion had more ships, more soldiers, more resources than humanity could ever match in direct combat. So the humans didn't fight directly. They fought dirty. On the agricultural world of Veneth, human workers poisoned the food supplies bound for Dominion military bases. 300,000 soldiers died from tainted rations within a week. On the fortress moon of Korath, a single human engineer overloaded the reactor core, destroying the installation and taking 50,000 Dominion troops with it. She sent a message before she died. For my daughter. On the capital world of Valoria Prime itself, human servants began killing their masters in their sleep. Archon nobles who had lived in perfect safety for centuries now slept in terror, wondering if their human butler or cook or cleaner would be the one to slit their throat. The Dominion had never faced this kind of war. They were used to standing armies, fleet battles, conventional warfare. They didn't know how to fight an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere, that could be any human in any role, that was willing to die as long as they took their enemies with them. Admiral Priya Sharma led the captured fleet in hit-and-run attacks against Dominion supply lines. Her ships would appear from faster-than-light travel, destroy a convoy, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. In 3 months, she crippled the Dominion's ability to move resources between sectors. Dr. Yuki Tanaka established hidden research bases in the outer rim of the galaxy in systems so remote that the Dominion had never bothered to explore them. There, human scientists worked on new weapons, new technologies, new ways to hurt the enemy. Commander Marcus Stone organized the ground resistance. He trained fighters in guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and asymmetric warfare. He established communication networks between resistance cells across 1,000 worlds. He became the symbol of human defiance, a man who had been a slave and a gladiator, who had killed for alien entertainment, and who now killed for freedom. The other species in the Dominion watched in amazement. The Korthan were a proud warrior race that had been conquered 4,000 years ago. They had tried to rebel 3 times. Each time, the Archons had crushed them utterly. Now they watched humans, a species they had dismissed as weak primitives, doing what they had never managed to do. The Silwari were a species of engineers and builders. They had served the Dominion faithfully for 6,000 years, hoping that loyalty would eventually earn them better treatment. It never had. Now they watched humans take by force what the Silwari had never been given. The Venketh were telepaths, like the Archons, but far weaker. The Archons had used them as servants and spies for millennia, always dangling the promise of freedom that never came. Now they watched humans fight without telepathy, without psionic powers, with nothing but rage and determination. One by one, representatives from these species began reaching out to the human resistance. The first to make contact was a Korthan warrior named Thrakos. He met with Commander Stone on a devastated human colony, surrounded by the bodies of those who had died in a Dominion attack. "Why?" Thrakos asked. "You were slaves for 500 years. You had no weapons, no ships, no power. What made you think you could defeat the Dominion?" Stone looked at the Korthan with eyes that had seen too much death. "Because we had no choice. Because death was better than living on our knees. Because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because humans don't know how to give up. It's not in our nature. You can beat us down, burn our cities, kill our children, and we'll still fight. We'll fight with our last breath. We'll fight until there's nothing left of us. That's who we are." Thrakos was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "The Korthan tried to rebel against the Dominion 3 times. Each time we failed because we fought alone. Perhaps—" He hesitated. "Perhaps we should not be alone anymore. Are you offering an alliance?" "I'm offering my sword," Thrakos said, "and the swords of every Korthan who still remembers what freedom feels like." Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. The Silwari offered their engineering expertise. The Venketh offered their intelligence networks. A dozen other species, all of them oppressed, all of them suffering, all of them inspired by humanity's impossible stand, offered whatever they could. Dr. Tanaka stood before the growing coalition's first joint council. Representatives from 15 species sat around a makeshift table in a hidden base on an unnamed moon. They were enemies by history, strangers by culture, united only by their hatred of the Dominion. For thousands of years, the Archons have ruled through division, Tanaka said. They kept us separate, suspicious, afraid of each other. They made us believe that we were alone, that resistance was futile, that we could never be free. She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of beings from a dozen different worlds. They were wrong. We are not alone anymore, and together we are going to tear their empire apart. The Coalition of the Broken was born. High Archon Valeth received reports of the growing alliance with disbelief. Lesser species working together. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was dangerous. For the first time in centuries, Valeth felt something he barely recognized: concern. These humans were not behaving like any conquered species he had ever encountered. They were not breaking. They were not surrendering. They were getting stronger. He called a meeting of the Archon Council, the 12 most powerful beings in the Dominion. The human pestilence has spread further than anticipated, he announced. They have formed alliances with other disloyal species. They have captured ships and weapons. They have established bases beyond our reach. His voice hardened. This ends now. The council discussed options: more troops, more ships, more orbital bombardments. But nothing had worked so far. The humans adapted to everything. They turned every attack into a recruitment tool, every massacre into a rallying cry. Finally, Archon Vethris spoke. She was the oldest of the council, 12,000 years old, and she had not spoken in a meeting for centuries. "These creatures are more dangerous than we realized," she said. "We have made them desperate. Desperate beings are unpredictable. We cannot defeat them through conventional means." "What do you suggest?" Valeth asked. "The extinction fleet," Vethris replied. "We gather every ship we can spare, 200,000 vessels. We find their hidden bases. We find their homeworld, and we burn everything. Leave nothing alive, no survivors, no refugees, no memory that they ever existed." The council was silent. The extinction fleet had been used only twice in Dominion history. Both times, entire species had been erased from existence. Valeth nodded slowly. "Begin preparations." As the Archons planned humanity's extinction, Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of a captured cruiser, watching the stars. Beside him stood Admiral Sharma, Dr. Tanaka, and Thrakos of the Korthan. "Intelligence reports that the Dominion is gathering a massive fleet," Sharma said. "We don't know where they're going to strike, but it's going to be big." "Let them come," Stone said quietly. "We knew this was coming. We knew they would try to destroy us completely." "Can we win?" Tanaka asked. Stone turned to face them. His face was scarred from years in the gladiatorial pits. His eyes were tired from months of constant fighting. But there was no fear in his expression. No doubt. "I don't know if we can win," he admitted. "But I know this. We will make them bleed for every step. We will make them pay for every life they've taken. And even if they destroy us, the galaxy will remember. They'll remember that humans stood up, that humans fought back, that humans refused to die quietly." He looked out at the stars again. "And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to inspire the next species they try to enslave. Maybe our fight will light a fire that even the Archons can't extinguish." Sharma nodded. "Then we better start preparing. If they're bringing everything they have, we need to be ready." "We'll be ready," Stone said. "We've been ready for 500 years. The war for the galaxy had truly begun. At the edge of the galaxy, far from any Dominion patrol routes, there was a dead system. Its star had burned out millions of years ago. Its planets were frozen rocks drifting in eternal darkness. Nothing lived there. Nothing had ever lived there. The Dominion had charted it once, marked it as worthless, and forgotten it existed. This was where humanity built its war machine. The Exodus shipyards started as a single captured freighter hiding in the shadow of a frozen gas giant. Within 6 months, it had grown into the largest military construction facility in the Outer Rim. Ships arrived constantly, captured vessels, stolen cargo haulers, anything that could carry refugees and resources to the hidden base. Admiral Priya Sharma stood on an observation platform, watching as thousands of humans worked on the skeleton of a new warship. Sparks flew in the darkness of space. Welding beams lit up like stars. The sounds of construction echoed through the station's corridors. "The Dominion built their empire on the backs of slaves," she said to Dr. Tanaka, who stood beside her. "For 5 centuries, humans built their ships, maintained their weapons, ran their factories. We know their technology better than they do. And now we're using that knowledge against them," Tanaka replied. Sharma nodded. "These ships won't be like theirs. The Dominion designs for intimidation. Big, impressive vessels meant to terrify their enemies into submission. We don't care about looking impressive. We care about winning." The first human-designed warship was called the Vengeance. It was smaller than a Dominion cruiser, but faster and more maneuverable. Its weapons were optimized for damage, not show. Its armor was distributed to protect critical systems, not to look imposing. Every design choice served a single purpose: killing Dominion ships. Commander Marcus Stone visited the shipyards when the Vengeance was completed. He walked through its corridors, ran his hand along its walls, sat in its command chair. The ship had been built by former slaves, engineers who had spent their lives constructing vessels for their masters and now built for themselves. "How does it feel?" Sharma asked him. Stone was quiet for a moment. "It feels like hope," he finally said. "For the first time since I can remember, it feels like we might actually have a chance." Over the following months, the shipyards produced more vessels: destroyers, cruisers, carriers, support ships. Each one was crewed by humans who had been slaves just a year before. Each one was commanded by officers who had learned warfare by watching their Dominion masters. But ships alone would not be enough to defeat the Archons. The Archons' greatest weapon was not their fleet. It was their minds. They were psionic beings, capable of reaching across space to crush thoughts, control actions, and foresee attacks before they happened. In 12,000 years, no species had ever found a way to counter this power. Dr. Tanaka intended to change that. Her laboratory was deep in the heart of the Exodus station, protected by layers of security that even the coalition leadership couldn't penetrate without authorization. There, she and a team of human scientists worked on the most important project of the war. "The Archon's psionic abilities operate on a specific quantum frequency," she explained to the Coalition Council. "It's the same frequency that the neural compliance system used to control us. When I developed the awakening signal, I learned how to disrupt that frequency." "You're saying you can block their powers?" Thrakos asked, leaning forward with interest. "Not just block," Tanaka said. "Eliminate. Within a certain radius, the null field generator creates a zone where psionic energy simply stops working. No telepathy, no telekinesis, no future sight, nothing." The council was silent. The implications were staggering. "If this works," Admiral Sharma said slowly, "the Archons become just flesh and bone. They become mortal." Tanaka nodded. "That's exactly what they become." The first null field generator was tested 3 months later. A captured Archon prisoner, a minor noble who had overseen a human breeding facility, was brought to an isolated location. His psionic abilities were confirmed. He could read minds, project mental attacks, and sense approaching threats. Then the null field was activated. The Archon screamed, not from pain, but from something worse. For the first time in his thousands of years of life, he was alone in his own head. He couldn't sense the minds around him. He couldn't reach out with his thoughts. He was blind in a way he had never experienced. Commander Stone stepped into the test chamber. The Archon looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "What have you done to me?" the Archon demanded. "We've made you like us," Stone replied. "How does it feel?" "To be helpless, to be weak, to be at the mercy of creatures you thought were beneath you." The Archon didn't answer. He was shaking. Stone drew his combat knife. "You ran a breeding facility. You separated mothers from their children. You sold human beings like livestock." He stepped closer. "I've been waiting to meet someone like you." What happened next was not recorded in official Coalition records. But when Stone emerged from the test chamber, he was alone. The null field generator worked perfectly. Production began immediately. The devices were integrated into human warships, installed in ground assault vehicles, and built into portable units that soldiers could carry into battle. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Archons would face enemies who didn't fear their powers. Word of the development spread through the Coalition. Species that had lived in terror of Archon mind control suddenly saw new possibilities. The Venketh telepaths offered their expertise in understanding psionic technology. The Silwari engineers helped miniaturize the devices. The Korthan warriors volunteered to be the first to test them in combat. The Coalition of the Broken was no longer just an alliance of the desperate. It was becoming a real military force. Not everyone joined the Coalition willingly. Some species had served the Dominion for so long that they had forgotten any other way of life. Others feared that the rebellion would fail and that they would be punished for disloyalty. And some simply didn't believe that humans could succeed where so many others had failed. The Manthari were one such species. They had been the Dominion's primary shipbuilders for 8,000 years. Their orbital factories produced half of the Empire's warships. Their loyalty to the Archons was considered unbreakable. Admiral Sharma knew that the Coalition needed the Manthari. Without their production capacity, the Dominion could replace its losses faster than the rebellion could destroy them. She sent envoys to Manthari Prime, offering alliance, trade, protection. The Manthari refused. "Your rebellion is doomed," their leader told the human envoy. "The Archons have ruled for 12,000 years. They will rule for 12,000 more. We will not throw away our position for a species that has been free for less than a year." Sharma received the report with a cold expression. "Then we'll have to convince them another way." The Battle of Manthari Prime was not a battle of conquest. Sharma had no intention of occupying the planet or subjugating its people. She simply wanted to make a point. The Human Liberation Navy arrived in the Manthari system with 37 warships. The system was defended by over 100 Dominion vessels, many of them crewed by Manthari officers who had served the Empire loyally for generations. "This is Admiral Priya Sharma of the Human Liberation Navy," she broadcast to the system. "We are not here to fight you. We are here to show you what we are capable of." The Dominion fleet attacked. It was a conventional engagement, the kind of battle they had fought and won countless times before. Their ships formed into standard combat formations. Their commanders issued standard tactical orders. Sharma had studied Dominion tactics for 20 years. She knew exactly what they would do before they did it. The human fleet split into 3 groups. The first engaged the Dominion head-on, drawing their attention and fire. The second circled around to hit their flanks. The third vanished into faster-than-light travel, emerging moments later directly behind the enemy formation. The Dominion fleet was caught in a crossfire. Their formations broke apart. Their commanders panicked. Their communications dissolved into chaos. In 3 hours, the human fleet destroyed 47 Dominion warships and captured 12 more. Human losses were 4 ships destroyed and 7 damaged. When the battle was over, Sharma opened a channel to Manthari Prime again. "We did not come here to conquer you," she said. "We came to show you that the Dominion is not invincible, that the Archons can be defeated, that freedom is possible." She paused. "When you're ready to join us, we'll be waiting." Within a month, Manthari engineers began secretly supplying the Coalition with ship components and technical data. Within 6 months, the entire Manthari government had defected to the rebellion. The Coalition grew stronger every day. More ships, more soldiers, more resources, more allies. What had begun as a desperate uprising was becoming a genuine threat to the most powerful empire in galactic history. High Archon Valeth watched the Coalition's growth with growing alarm. His advisors brought him reports of battles lost, systems falling, species defecting. Every solution he tried seemed to make things worse. He increased military spending, but that strained the economy. He conscripted more soldiers, but they deserted to the rebellion. He ordered crackdowns on dissent, but that only created more rebels. And everywhere, always, there were the humans. They were the heart of the Coalition. They provided its leadership, its strategy, its relentless will to fight. Other species joined because of them. Other species fought because of them. Somehow, a species that had been slaves just a year ago had become the symbol of resistance for the entire galaxy. "They should have been broken," Valeth told his council. "We killed billions of them. We destroyed their worlds. We slaughtered their children. Any other species would have surrendered." "Perhaps," Archon Vethris suggested, "that is precisely why they fight so hard. They have nothing left to lose. Every atrocity we commit only strengthens their resolve." "Then we must commit the ultimate atrocity," Valeth replied. "The extinction fleet is ready. 200,000 warships. We will find their hidden bases. We will find their homeworld, and we will burn everything until nothing is left." "Where will you strike first?" Vethris asked. Valeth's eyes gleamed with ancient malice. "Earth, the world they came from, the world they dream of returning to. We will turn it to ash while they watch, and then we will hunt down every last survivor and do the same to them." The order went out. The extinction fleet began to move. Commander Stone received the intelligence report in his quarters aboard the Vengeance. He read it 3 times, making sure he understood correctly. 200,000 ships. The largest fleet ever assembled in Dominion history, heading for Earth. He called an emergency meeting of the Coalition Command. "They're going to attack our homeworld," he said. "The Archons are gathering everything they have. They want to end this war by destroying the heart of the rebellion." "Can we stop them?" a Corthan general asked. Admiral Sharma studied the tactical data. "Our fleet has grown significantly. We have 12,000 combat-capable vessels, but 12,000 against 200,000. She shook her head. "Those are not good odds." "Then we'll have to fight smarter," Stone said. "We won't meet them in open space. We'll make them come to us. We'll use Earth's defenses, the asteroid belt, the gas giants, everything we can." "It still might not be enough," Sharma said quietly. "It has to be enough," Stone replied. "Earth is more than just a planet. It's a symbol. It's the world our ancestors came from. It's the dream that kept us going through 5 centuries of slavery. If we lose Earth, we lose more than territory. We lose hope." Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. "Then we better make sure we don't lose." The Coalition began preparing for the greatest battle in human history. Ships were recalled from across the galaxy. Soldiers were mobilized. Weapons were stockpiled. The Exodus shipyards worked around the clock, producing as many vessels as possible before the extinction fleet arrived. On every human world, on every Coalition base, on every ship and station where humans lived, they prepared for war. Not a war of liberation anymore. A war of survival. Admiral Sharma looked out at the stars from the bridge of her flagship, the HLN Prometheus. Somewhere out there, the largest fleet ever assembled was coming to destroy everything she loved. "We've come so far," she said to herself. "From slaves to warriors, from victims to fighters. We've done the impossible." She clenched her fist. "And we'll do it again." The Battle of Sol was coming, and humanity would either triumph or be erased from the universe. Either way, they would make sure the galaxy never forgot them. Earth hung in the darkness of space like a blue jewel against black velvet. It had been over 5 centuries since humans had walked freely on its surface. The great cities of the past were ruins, overgrown with vegetation. The oceans were still blue. The clouds still drifted across its face. But the world that had given birth to humanity was a shadow of what it had once been. Admiral Priya Sharma stood on the bridge of the HLN Prometheus, watching her homeworld through the viewport. Behind her, 12,000 human and coalition warships had formed a defensive perimeter around the Sol system. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever commanded. It would not be enough. "Final report from long-range sensors," her tactical officer announced. "The extinction fleet has entered the outer edge of the system. 217,000 vessels confirmed. They'll reach weapons range in approximately 14 hours. Sharma nodded slowly. 17-1 odds. In any conventional battle, those numbers meant certain defeat. But this was not going to be a conventional battle. "All ships. This is Admiral Sharma," she broadcast to the fleet. "In 14 hours, the largest enemy force in galactic history will arrive at our doorstep. They've come to destroy our homeworld. They've come to end our species. They think they're going to win." She paused, letting the words sink in. "They're wrong. We've been preparing for this moment for generations. Our grandparents dreamed of this day. Our parents fought and died hoping we would see it. And now, we stand between the Archons and everything we love. We stand between tyranny and freedom. We stand between death and life." Her voice hardened. "They outnumber us. They always have. They had more ships when they invaded Earth 500 years ago. They had more soldiers when they put collars around our necks. They had more power when they murdered billions of our brothers and sisters. But we're still here. We're still fighting. And we're not going to stop until the last human draws their last breath." Across the fleet, humans cheered. Korthan warriors pounded their fists against their chests. Silwari engineers gripped their tools like weapons. The coalition had come to Sol not because they thought they would win, but because they knew they couldn't abandon humanity when it needed them most. "All ships, begin final preparations," Sharma ordered. "Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth." Commander Marcus Stone was not on the Prometheus. He was on a smaller ship, a specially modified assault cruiser called the Final Argument. Its purpose was not fleet combat. Its purpose was something far more dangerous. "We've reviewed the intelligence 3 times, Dr. Tanaka said, appearing on his screen. "The High Archon's flagship, the Throne of Eternity, will be at the center of the extinction fleet. It's the most heavily defended position in the entire formation." "I know," Stone replied. "Marcus, this is essentially a suicide mission. Even with the null field generators, even with our best soldiers, the chances of reaching Valith—" "I know," Stone repeated. He turned to face her image. "For 500 years they've ruled us through fear. The Archons aren't just military leaders, they're symbols. As long as Valith lives, as long as any Archon lives, species across the galaxy will believe they're unstoppable. We need to prove them wrong." Tanaka was quiet for a moment. "You don't have to be the one who does it." Stone smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Yes, I do. I was a gladiator. I killed other slaves for their entertainment. I have a lot of debts to pay." He looked at his hands, hands that had taken hundreds of lives in the arena. "Maybe this is how I pay them." "Marcus, take care of our people, Yuki. Whatever happens today, make sure someone survives to tell the story." He cut the transmission before she could respond. The extinction fleet entered the Sol system like a tide of death. 200,000 warships, arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of humanity's sun. At their center flew the Throne of Eternity, a ship so massive it could be seen from Earth's surface with the naked eye. High Archon Valeth stood on his command platform, watching the human fleet through the viewport. They had arranged themselves in a defensive formation around Earth, using the planet itself as a shield against certain angles of attack. Clever, but pointless. They have approximately 12,000 ships, his tactical advisor reported. Primarily captured Dominion vessels with some ships of their own construction. Their defensive position is competent. It doesn't matter, Valeth replied. They could have 1,000,000 ships and it wouldn't matter. Order the fleet to advance. Standard extermination pattern. The extinction fleet surged forward. Admiral Sharma watched them come. Her hands were steady on the console in front of her. Her heart was steady in her chest. She had known this moment would arrive since the day she was freed from her neural implant. She had been preparing for it ever since. First wave is in range, her tactical officer reported. All ships, Sharma commanded. Fire. The Battle of Sol began. 12,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked across the void. Energy beams carved through space. The leading edge of the extinction fleet exploded in a storm of debris and fire. But the Dominion kept coming. Their losses in the first volley were significant. Hundreds of ships destroyed, thousands of crew killed. For any normal enemy, such casualties would have caused hesitation. For the extinction fleet, they were acceptable losses. The two fleets collided. Space became chaos. Ships dueled at close range, their weapons tearing through hulls and shields alike. Fighters swarmed between the larger vessels, their pilots executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for any but the most experienced warriors. The human ships fought with desperate ferocity. They knew that every Dominion vessel they destroyed was one less enemy for their children to face. They knew that every minute they survived was another minute for Earth to endure. The Corthan cruiser Blade of Vengeance rammed a Dominion battleship 3 times its size, its crew detonating their reactor core to take the enemy with them. A squadron of Silwari destroyers held a critical choke point for 4 hours, destroying 37 enemy ships before being overwhelmed. A lone human pilot, her ship crippled and burning, guided her vessel into the engine core of a Dominion carrier, ensuring it would never threaten another human world. Across the battlefield, such acts of sacrifice played out thousands of times. Coalition soldiers died so that others might live. They died with weapons in their hands and curses on their lips. They died free, but they were still dying. 3 hours into the battle, the Coalition had lost 4,000 ships. The Dominion had lost nearly 30,000. In any other context, those numbers would have represented an overwhelming victory for the Coalition. But they still had 8,000 ships against over 170,000. We're being pushed back, Sharma's tactical officer reported. If this continues, they'll reach weapons range of Earth within 6 hours. Sharma nodded grimly. Then we need to hold them for 6 hours. Admiral, I know what it is, she cut him off. Order all ships to fall back to secondary defensive positions. We'll use the lunar installations and orbital platforms to strengthen our line and signal Commander Stone. It's time. The final argument had been hiding in the shadow of Jupiter's moon, Ganymede, waiting for the right moment. When the signal came from Admiral Sharma, Stone gathered his assault team in the ship's hangar bay. 300 soldiers. Humans. Corthan. Venkith. The best warriors the Coalition had. Each one wore armor equipped with personal null-field generators. Each one carried weapons designed specifically to kill Archons. Stone looked at them and felt something he hadn't felt since the days before his implant was removed. Pride. These beings, these free beings, had volunteered to follow him into almost certain death. not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in the mission. The Throne of Eternity is the most heavily defended ship in the galaxy, he told them. Getting aboard will be difficult. Getting to the High Archon will be nearly impossible. Most of us won't survive. No one moved. No one spoke. They already knew all of this. But if we succeed, if we kill Valeth, we change history. We prove that the Archons can be defeated. We prove that the strongest beings in the galaxy can bleed and die like anyone else. Stone drew his blade, the same blade he had used to kill hundreds of opponents in the gladiatorial pits. Today, we end 12,000 years of tyranny. Today, we avenge every human who ever died in chains. The soldiers raised their weapons and roared their approval. The final argument launched from Ganymede at maximum acceleration. The ship was small and fast, designed to slip through gaps in the enemy formation rather than fight its way through. Its pilot, a woman named Lynn, who had once been a slave navigator on a Dominion cruiser, flew with a skill that bordered on supernatural. She wove between enemy ships, dodged defensive fire, used debris fields as cover. "Throne of Eternity. 2 minutes out," she reported. "They've spotted us. Fighters incoming." "Get us as close as you can," Stone replied. "We'll handle the rest." The final argument's weapons were limited, but they were enough to clear a path. The ship's gunners destroyed a dozen enemy fighters before they could close to weapons range. Lynn executed a maneuver that should have torn the ship apart, using the gravity of a nearby Dominion cruiser to slingshot toward her target. 30 seconds to contact. Enemy point defense is targeting us." Stone felt the ship shudder as energy beams struck its hull. Warning lights flashed across the hangar bay. Somewhere a fire was burning. 20 seconds. Another impact. This one harder. Stone grabbed a handhold as the floor tilted beneath him. 10 seconds. Hull breach in engineering. We're losing power. "Just get us there," Stone said through gritted teeth. "Contact in 5, 4, 3, 2. The final argument slammed into the hull of the Throne of Eternity. The collision tore through both ships, creating a wound of twisted metal and vented atmosphere. In the hangar bay, Stone's team activated their magnetic boots and charged toward the breach. They were aboard. The interior of the Throne of Eternity was vast and ornate, decorated with the stolen treasures of 1,000 conquered worlds. Stone's team moved through its corridors like ghosts, their null field generators creating zones of silence where Archon minds could not reach. Dominion soldiers met them at every turn. Elite guards, the best warriors the Empire had to offer. They fought with discipline and skill. They fought for their lords and their emperor. They died anyway. Stone led from the front, his blade carving through enemy soldiers with brutal efficiency. The years in the gladiatorial pits had taught him how to fight, how to kill, how to survive. He used that knowledge now, not for alien entertainment, but for his people's freedom. Around him, his team fell one by one. A Corthan warrior went down defending a corridor, buying time for the others to advance. A human soldier detonated a grenade in the middle of an enemy formation, taking a dozen guards with him. A Venkath telepath burned out her own mind, projecting a psychic scream that disabled enemy communications throughout the ship. By the time Stone reached the throne room, only 17 of his original 300 soldiers remained. The doors to the throne room were massive, carved from some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Stone placed explosive charges on the hinges and signaled his team to take cover. The explosion was deafening. The doors collapsed inward. High Archon Valeth sat on a throne of crystal and gold, surrounded by his personal guard. He was ancient beyond measure, his body frail, but his presence overwhelming. Even with the null field generators dampening his power, Stone could feel the weight of his attention like a physical force. "So," Valeth said, his voice like wind through dead leaves. "The slave has come to kill the master." "No," Stone replied, stepping over the rubble of the destroyed doors. "The free man has come to execute the tyrant." Vayleth laughed. It was a terrible sound. "I have lived for 9,000 years. I have watched stars die. I have crushed civilizations beneath my heel. And you, a creature who should be fighting in my arenas, think you can threaten me?" "Yes," Stone said simply. He activated the null-field generator strapped to his chest. The device hummed to life, creating a sphere of absolute psionic silence around him. Vayleth's eyes widened as he felt his powers drain away. "What?" Stone didn't give him time to finish. He charged. Vayleth's guards moved to intercept, but Stone's remaining soldiers engaged them. The throne room became a battlefield, blades clashing and bodies falling. Stone ignored all of it, his focus entirely on the High Archon. Vayleth was old, but he was not helpless. He drew a sword from his throne, an ancient weapon that had killed countless enemies over millennia. Even without his psionic powers, he was still a trained warrior. They fought. Stone was faster. Vayleth was more experienced. Stone had youth and rage. Vayleth had centuries of skill. Their blades clashed again and again, sparks flying in the dim light of the throne room. "Why do you fight so hard?" Vayleth asked between strikes. "Your species is broken. Your worlds are burned. Your people are dying in the void outside this ship. What do you hope to accomplish?" "Freedom," Stone replied, pressing his attack. "Something you wouldn't understand." Vayleth's sword caught Stone's blade, twisting it aside. The Archon's counterattack opened a wound across Stone's ribs. Blood flowed. Pain followed. "Freedom is an illusion," Vayleth said. "There are only masters and slaves. It has always been this way. It will always be this way." Stone fell back, one hand pressed against his wound. He was losing blood. His vision was beginning to blur. "You're wrong," he said. "That's the thing about humans. We'd rather die fighting than live on our knees." He launched himself at Vayleth with everything he had left. The High Archon raised his sword to block. Stone's blade met his in a shower of sparks. But this time, Stone didn't try to overpower him. He let his sword slide along Vayleth's blade, guiding it aside, and then he stepped forward and drove his knife, a small, hidden blade he had carried since his days in the arena, into Vayleth's heart. The High Archon looked down at the weapon in his chest with an expression of pure disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "No," Stone replied. "Inevitable." Vayleth crumpled. 9,000 years of life ended in a moment. The ruler of the greatest empire in galactic history died on the floor of his own throne room, killed by a former slave. The remaining Dominion guards stared in shock. Their emperor, their god, was dead. Stone's surviving soldiers wasted no time. They cut down the guards before they could recover, securing the throne room. "Commander," one of them reported, "what are your orders?" Stone looked at the body of Vayleth. He felt empty. All the rage, all the hate, all the desire for vengeance, it was gone. In its place was something quieter. Satisfaction. Peace. "Broadcast a message to the extinction fleet," he said. "Tell them their emperor is dead. Tell them the war is over." "Will they believe us?" Stone picked up Vayleth's sword, the weapon of the High Archon, the symbol of Dominion power for 12,000 years. "Show them his body. They'll believe." The transmission went out across the battlefield, an image of the dead High Archon lying on the floor of his throne room, surrounded by human soldiers. The effect was immediate. Some Dominion ships surrendered immediately. Others fled. Still others continued fighting, unable or unwilling to accept what had happened. But the unified force of the extinction fleet, the unstoppable tide of death that had been about to overwhelm Earth, shattered into fragments. Admiral Sharma watched the enemy formation break apart and felt tears running down her face. They had done it. Against all odds, against all reason, they had done it. "All ships," she broadcast, her voice shaking. "Press the attack. Finish this." The Battle of Sol raged for another 8 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Without leadership, without coordination, the extinction fleet was destroyed piece by piece. When the last enemy ship fled into faster-than-light travel, the surviving coalition forces gathered above Earth. Of the 12,000 ships that had entered the battle, fewer than 4,000 remained. Over 2 million coalition soldiers had died, but Earth still floated in space, blue and beautiful and free, and humanity had won. The news of High Archon Valeth's death traveled across the galaxy at the speed of light. Quantum communication networks carried the image of his body lying on the floor of his throne room. Video footage showed human soldiers standing over the corpse of the most powerful being the galaxy had ever known. Within hours, the Dominion began to crumble. On Valoria Prime, the remaining Archons sealed themselves in their ancient citadel, protected by shields that could withstand a planetary bombardment. They refused all communication, all negotiation, all contact with the outside world. The empire they had built over 12,000 years was dying, and they chose to hide rather than face it. Without the Archon's leadership, the Dominion's military command structure collapsed. Fleet admirals who had received orders through psionic links suddenly found themselves cut off. Generals who had relied on Archon strategic guidance were left without direction. Some tried to continue fighting. Most didn't know what to fight for. The vassal species saw their opportunity. On 100 worlds, the oppressed rose up against their masters. The Korthan, freed from coalition service, returned to their homeworld and tore down every symbol of Dominion rule. The Silwari seized control of the orbital factories they had built and operated for millennia. The Venkith, their telepathic powers no longer suppressed by Archon oversight, began rebuilding their own culture for the first time in 6,000 years. Everywhere the message was the same. The Dominion is fallen. The humans defeated them. We are free. Admiral Priya Sharma stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching reports come in from across the former empire. Her ship was battered, hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, weapons systems barely functional, crew exhausted beyond measure. But they had survived. Earth had survived. "Ma'am," her communications officer said, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Dominion fleet elements. They want to know our terms." Sharma was quiet for a moment. For her entire life, she had dreamed of this moment. The moment when the Dominion would fall, when humans would stand victorious over their oppressors. Now that it was here, she wasn't sure how to feel. "Tell them to stand down and await further instructions," she finally said. "No hostile actions will be taken against ships that surrender peacefully." Understood. The communication went out. More surrender requests followed. Within a week, the Dominion's military had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. But winning the war was only the beginning. Now came the harder part, deciding what to do with the peace. The coalition leadership gathered on a repaired station orbiting Earth. Representatives from every member species were present. Humans, Korthan, Silwari, Venketh, Manthari, dozens of others. They had fought together. They had bled together. Now they had to build together. Commander Marcus Stone arrived last, still recovering from his wounds. He had spent 3 weeks in a medical bay, his body healing from the damage sustained in his duel with Valeth. Dr. Tanaka had told him he was lucky to be alive. He had replied that luck had nothing to do with it. "The Dominion controlled 400,000 star systems," Admiral Sharma said, addressing the assembly. "Most of them have been left without governance. Former Dominion military units are scattered across the galaxy, some still fighting, some surrendering, some simply lost. Trillions of beings who lived under Archon rule need to know what happens next." She paused, looking around the room. We have a choice to make. We can become the new conquerors. Take the Dominion's place, rule the galaxy as they did. We have the military power. We have the reputation. No one would be able to stop us. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some voices supported this idea. The galaxy had always been ruled by the strong. Why shouldn't it be humanity's turn? Or, Sharma continued, we can do something different. We can build something that has never existed before. A galaxy where species are free to govern themselves. A galaxy where alliances are voluntary, not forced. A galaxy where no one wears a neural collar or fights in a gladiatorial pit. Idealistic, a Korthan general growled. The galaxy has always been ruled by force. Remove the Archons, and someone else will rise to take their place. Better it be us than some new tyrant. That's exactly what the Archons believed, Stone said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. They thought they were the only ones capable of ruling, Stone continued. They thought the lesser species needed to be controlled. They thought that without their guidance, the galaxy would fall into chaos. He shook his head. They were wrong. And if we follow their path, we'll be wrong too. He stepped forward, facing the assembly. I've killed more beings than I can count. In the arena, in the rebellion, in the war. I've seen what happens when power is used to dominate. It creates slaves and masters, victims and oppressors. It creates a cycle of violence that never ends. He looked at his hands, hands that had taken so many lives. We have a chance to break that cycle, not because we're weak, because we're strong enough to choose a different path. The debate continued for hours. Species who had suffered under Dominion rule wanted revenge. Species who had collaborated with the Dominion wanted protection. Species who had been caught in the middle just wanted peace. Dr. Tanaka spoke last. When I created the awakening signal, she said, I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I believed humans deserved to be free. Not to rule over others, but to live their own lives on their own terms. She looked around the room. Every species in this room has been oppressed. Every species has suffered. If we use that suffering as an excuse to oppress others, we haven't learned anything. We've just become the next generation of tyrants. She paused. I say we build something better. Not because it will be easy, it won't be. Not because it will succeed. It might not. But because it's right. And because if we don't try, the Archons will have won after all. The vote was close. But in the end, the coalition chose freedom. The Terran Covenant was signed 6 months after the Battle of Sol. It established a new order in the galaxy, not an empire but an alliance of free worlds. Every species that joined did so voluntarily. Every member had an equal voice. No world could be conquered or enslaved. No being could be property. Humanity took its place not as rulers, but as protectors. The Human Liberation Navy became the backbone of the Covenant's defensive forces. Human diplomats worked to mediate disputes between former enemies. Human engineers helped rebuild worlds devastated by war. Not everyone accepted the new order. Some species refused to join the Covenant, preferring to go their own way. Some former Dominion officers formed pirate fleets, raiding unprotected worlds. Some Archon loyalists continued to fight, hoping their masters would one day emerge from their citadel and restore the old order. They never did. The Archons remained sealed in their citadel on Valoria Prime, watching through their shields as the galaxy they had once ruled moved on without them. They were not attacked. They were not besieged. They were simply ignored. For beings who had considered themselves gods for 12,000 years, this was worse than death. Earth was healed slowly. The scars of Dominion occupation took generations to repair. Forests were replanted, cities were rebuilt, monuments were raised to those who had died in the long struggle for freedom. Commander Marcus Stone retired after the founding of the Covenant. He had spent his entire life fighting, first as a gladiator, then as a rebel, then as a general. Now, for the first time, he had nothing to fight against. He built a small house on the coast of what had once been called Greece, overlooking a sea that his ancestors had sailed thousands of years ago. He planted a garden. He learned to cook. He watched sunsets over waters that had witnessed the birth of human civilization. Sometimes old soldiers would visit him. They would talk about the war, about lost friends, about victories and defeats. Stone would listen, pour them drinks, and remember. Admiral Sharma visited him once near the end of her own life. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, sitting beside him on the porch of his house. "The things we did? The people we killed?" Stone was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary," he finally said. "I regret that so many had to die. I regret that we couldn't find another way." He looked out at the sea, its surface golden in the setting sun. "But I don't regret doing what had to be done. The alternative was extinction. The alternative was eternal slavery. Given the same choices, I'd make the same decisions." Sharma nodded slowly. "I think I would too." They sat together in silence, two old warriors watching the end of another day. Dr. Yuki Tanaka lived longer than either of them. She continued her research, developing technologies that would have seemed like magic to her ancestors. She trained new generations of scientists, passing on not just knowledge, but wisdom. Near the end of her life, she was asked what she considered her greatest achievement. "Most people would say the awakening signal," she replied. "And that was important. It freed our people. But I think my greatest achievement was what came after, helping to build a galaxy where the signal was no longer needed, where no species would ever need to be awakened because they were never enslaved in the first place." She smiled, her ancient face creased with wrinkles. "The greatest victories aren't won with weapons. They're won by creating something better than what existed before." In the rebuilt city of New Geneva, a monument was constructed to honor the dead. It listed every known human who had died in the rebellion, over 6 billion names, etched in crystal that would last for millennia. Around the central monument were smaller memorials to the coalition species who had fought alongside humanity. At the base of the monument, an inscription was carved. "They called us primitive, they called us weak, they tried to break us, but we are humanity, forged in fire, tempered by suffering, united in purpose. We bend, we bleed, but we do not break, and when we rise, nothing in this galaxy can stand against us." Below this, a smaller inscription was added. "May those who come after us never need to prove this truth again." Centuries passed. The Terran Covenant grew and changed, facing new challenges and new threats. But the core principles established after the fall of the Dominion endured. Freedom, equality, the right of every being to determine their own destiny. Humanity spread across the stars, not as conquerors, but as explorers, builders, and friends. They carried with them the memory of what they had survived and the determination to ensure it never happened again. And in the darkness between galaxies, where no light reached and no ship had ever traveled, signals continued to spread, the echo of the awakening signal, carrying the message of freedom to places humanity had not yet reached. Somewhere out there, other species heard it. Other slaves felt the first stirring of hope. Other worlds looked up at the stars and wondered if freedom was possible. The story of humanity was not over. It had barely begun. But the chapter that had started with chains and ended with victory would never be forgotten. It would be taught to children on 1,000 worlds. It would be sung by poets and recorded by historians. It would stand as proof that even the greatest empires could fall and that even the most oppressed peoples could rise, because that was the truth that the Archons had never understood. That was the truth that every tyrant in history had failed to grasp. Humanity didn't know how to give up, And when pushed to the edge of extinction, they pushed back with a fury that could shake the foundations of the universe. The galaxy learned this lesson once. It would never need to learn it again.